So this morning, as I've said, we're starting a new sermon series called Summer Reading. And each week throughout July, Stephanie and I are going to be pairing a passage of Scripture with a compelling book that she and I have read over this past year. And I've got to tell you once more, these are not on the shelves of Lifeway, okay? They're not at your local Christian bookstore, but they are available at Books A Million and, as always, on Amazon. You can pick these books up if you would like to join in some of these readings, or if a sermon happens to pique your interest, you might learn more from one of these books. One of the things that I've found throughout my life is that summer reading, it actually stretches my mind and it also softens my heart. And I'm reminded that often the best stories, they invite us to walk in someone else's shoes and to see our own lives through a new lens. Now, to all of the English and lit teachers in the room, I have to tell you, I did not appreciate summer reading when I was in high school. I didn't. But had I not taken the time to do it, I would have missed out on some of my favorite books and stories, like Ethan Frome, The Old Man and the Sea, Flowers for Algernon. Friends, read Flowers for Algernon. It'll just do your heart good. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, The Grapes of Wrath. These books and many others were transformative for me as I grew up. And I believe that when we read intentionally and with our faith in view, that these stories, that these books can help us become more compassionate, more courageous, and in fact, more Christ-like. So this week, we're diving into the first book of the series called Unreasonable Hospitality. And it's, again, not a religious book, but it's deeply spiritual in the way that it invites us to consider how we welcome others, how it invites us to be intentional in the way that we welcome others. Something that Jesus modeled over and over in the Scriptures and throughout the Gospel. So the author of this book, Will Guidara, was the owner of 11 Madison Park, one of the top restaurants in New York City, and in fact, one of the top restaurants in the world. And what Will began to realize as he was working in the restaurant was that what set them apart in the crowded restaurant and hospitality market wasn't the food. Friends, every great restaurant has good food. Every great chef knows how to cook a steak. They do. What he realized was that what set them apart in this crowded, competitive field of fine dining, it was the way that they made people feel when they came for dinner, when they came to eat in the restaurant. And that's when he made hospitality, not just service, the centerpiece of their culture. In fact, he coined a phrase that became the title of his book. He wanted the restaurant to be a place of unreasonable hospitality. And this is what he means by unreasonable hospitality. It means going beyond what's expected to make people feel truly seen, valued, and cared for in ways that they've never expected. One of the stories that he lifts up, and there are many stories in the book, but one of the stories that he happens to lift up is the story of a group of international travelers and foodies who come into 11 Madison Park as the final meal on their tour of the culinary scene in New York. They'd eaten at all of the great restaurants in the city. But as they were sitting there and Will was within earshot, he heard one of the travelers say, "We've had all of this incredible food, but we haven't had a real New York City hot dog." Now, Will didn't just smile and nod from afar. He ran out the doors of the restaurant, bought a hot dog from a vendor, and served it to them on fine china, mid-meal. I'll tell you more about that in just a minute. That hot dog didn't match the culture of the restaurant. In fact, it broke all of the rules of fine dining, but it made that group of travelers from far away, whom he would never see again, feel like the entire restaurant cared about them. And not just in some kind of corporate, we care about you kind of way, but like they cared about them personally. Y'all, that story, extravagant and unexpected, it feels like something Jesus might do, because what we see in Scripture is that Jesus is always present in every moment. He makes space for the unexpected, and he meets people right where they are. Jesus knew how to practice unreasonable hospitality. And that brings us to our Scripture today. It's a story about the power of unreasonable hospitality and the effect it can have on people's lives. I want you to hear these verses again from Luke 19. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through, and a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. Remember those two labels. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed Jesus gladly. All the people saw this. They began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I'll give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, that's Zacchaeus, the tax collector who's wealthy, by the way, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." Now, friends, Zacchaeus was a Jewish tax collector. And in Jewish culture, because of his occupation, Zacchaeus was despised. He was distrusted. He was written off. He was good for nothing. No one wanted him around because everyone believed that he had sold out his own people. And he sold them out to the Roman Empire. Friends, nobody likes the IRS, right? We don't like taxes. It's just one of those things. Nobody likes seeing that line taken out of their paycheck. Zacchaeus was the living embodiment of corrupt taxation. You might even say taxation without representation, but I digress. But in spite of this, Jesus notices him, and he calls him by name. And then Jesus says something that's just outrageous for a rabbi to say. "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." It's easy to miss how surprising and unreasonably hospitable this is. Jesus doesn't ask Zacchaeus to prove himself before he comes to his house. He doesn't tell him to clean up his act, and then he might be ready for Jesus to come over. Jesus simply extends hospitality to someone that everyone else had written off as a lost cause. Jesus shares a meal at Zacchaeus' home, sits at Zacchaeus' table, where Jesus makes Zacchaeus feel more welcomed than perhaps he ever has before. Y'all, that's not just kindness. It's unreasonable hospitality. And that kind of hospitality, that kind of welcome, is transformative. Because of Jesus' radical welcome, Zacchaeus' life is changed, and he responds with generosity, restitution, and faith. And what I love about this is that Jesus doesn't just serve up salvation like some kind of impersonal correspondence from a credit card company, right? You get those things, don't you, in your mail? They say, "You're approved." Well, sometimes there's an exclamation point, but they all feel that way, don't they? The credit card company doesn't really care. Jesus doesn't serve up salvation like the credit card company that puts junk mail in your mailbox. Jesus delivers it like a dinner invitation. And it makes all the difference in Zacchaeus' life. Y'all, I think that we can practice that kind of hospitality here. I think we can do it. I know that we can help people who feel like they don't have a place to connect, to grow, and to meet Jesus, to find their place here. But I think we have to be willing to do what Jesus has done and begin to practice some unreasonable hospitality. To go beyond just saying that we have open hearts, open minds, and open doors, but truly being a place where every child of God feels the gracious welcome of God. So I think there are some ways that we can begin to practice unreasonable hospitality right here and right now. So where do we begin as disciples of Jesus Christ? I think Guidara, he gives these 3 simple but powerful practices for creating the kind of welcome in our own lives. And they echo the way that Jesus lived. The first is this: to stay present. In Unreasonable Hospitality, it says, so often we have such long to-do lists that we aren't able to slow down enough to actually listen to the people around us, to the things they're saying, and all the things that they're not saying. We've got to be present. Y'all, Jesus didn't miss Zacchaeus up in the tree. He was present enough to notice that Zacchaeus was there. What might we see? Who might we see if we slowed down long enough, put down our phone long enough to truly notice the people that God is putting in front of us? How might we, in our being present, allow someone to be seen, known, and valued in an unexpected way? Who knows, that simple act of being present might open someone's heart and life to the gospel of Jesus Christ. We've got to stay present. Well, we've also got to create room for playfulness. That hot dog in the 5-star restaurant, or 4-star restaurant at that time, it only happened because Will decided that it was okay to break a few expectations to make someone feel special. In fact, he talks about it in his book, how the chef didn't want to serve the hot dog on the restaurant's fine china. He didn't want to do it. The chef was well-trained, very, very particular about what went out of his kitchen, and he did not want to serve that hot dog. But Will wouldn't stop saying, we've got to do this, we've got to do this. And so the chef relents and he cuts the hot dog into 4 perfect segments and smears a little mustard and ketchup on the rim of the plate, along with a ramekin of sauerkraut. And that dirty dishwater dog made that group stay. It was transformative. Sometimes being Christ-like means coloring outside the lines of what's expected, doing some things that others might mutter about, like those people in the town muttered as Jesus was passing through, inviting Zacchaeus to dinner. We might have to do something that's unexpected. When's the last time your hospitality made someone laugh, or surprised them in a beautiful way, or just gave them a space where they could be themselves and share what's on their heart and on their mind? It doesn't have to be hard. You can do this. Joyful welcome doesn't have to be formal. It can be playful, it can be fun, and sometimes, I think, in fact, most of the time, it should be. You know, the song says, they will know that we are Christians by our love, not by our seriousness, not by our conformity or uniformity, but by our love. Loving people means being present and playful in ways that help us to reach out to the lost, the hurting, the forgotten, the pushed aside. Then there's a third principle for us, and that's this, that one size fits one. If what you're trying to give is people a sense of genuine belonging, then we've got to understand that one size fits one. In other words, a bottle of champagne would have been a nice gesture to that group of foodies from far off, traveling through New York. But it wouldn't have been that hot dog. It wouldn't have been that personal. It wouldn't have been that meaningful. It certainly would have been forgotten. But that group never forgot that moment. The same goes for us. Loving people like Jesus means that we personalize our welcome. One size doesn't fit all. Our hospitality, it becomes holy when it becomes specific. Because genuine welcome, it isn't about us. It's about them. It's about welcoming people as they are, right where they are, even if they're up in a tree. So that's what Jesus did for Zacchaeus. He didn't deliver a sermon to Zacchaeus. Jesus gave him his presence. He gave him his time. He gave him time at the table. So friends, what would it look like for us to practice this kind of unreasonable hospitality? At church, it might simply be welcoming that new face and actually starting a conversation that's deeper than where you're from, how you doing, what's your name. Really connecting with somebody is what we're called to. At home, it might be inviting someone to dinner who's been going through a lot and who just needs a space to decompress. At work, it might be creating a space in your office or even in your truck where others feel seen, valued, and appreciated. So this week, I want to challenge you, friends. I want to challenge you to do one thing that goes beyond what's expected and pushes the boundaries of unreasonable hospitality. Not because you have to, but because you get to. Because you know that Jesus' unreasonable welcome, his unreasonable hospitality welcomes sinners and broken people like you and me in the very same way. Jesus is calling for all of us to come down out of our trees because he wants to meet with us. Friend, Zacchaeus climbed a tree to catch a glimpse of Jesus. What if someone could catch a glimpse of Jesus through your unreasonable hospitality? That's what this series is all about. Not just reading books, but letting these lessons help us become living stories of God's grace, of God's hospitality, of God's welcome. So this week, may you slow down and be present. May you make room for joy and surprise, and may you meet someone exactly where they are. And may your table, in your time, in your smile, be someone's first glimpse of the grace of Jesus Christ.